Fresh Art International presents conversations about creativity in the 21st century. This is Fresh Art International, and I'm Kathy Bird. Today we're taking you to Brazil for the opening of the 32nd São Paulo Biennial. I meet Curator Jochen Volz inside the pavilion that's been home to the exhibition most of its life. We're sitting in a room with glass walls, looking out onto Ibirapuera Park, a vast urban green space that surrounds this building. A team led by architects Oscar Niemeyer and Hélio Uchôa designed this building and the park and an array of other venues to commemorate São Paulo's 400th anniversary in 1954. These days, up to 200,000 people a day gather here to immerse themselves in nature and culture. The International Contemporary Art Exhibition, free and open to the public, welcomes a huge number of visitors, many for their first encounter with art. Jochen Volz and his team designed the layout of the 32nd Biennial to resonate with the park's spatial dynamic. I love the way you designed the biennial space, like a garden.
If you look at the experiences from past editions, very often the biennial has been structured on a more urban principle. So you create a corridor and you create blocks and halls and paths. In an urban logic, things do compare by size, which is, of course, something very different than the garden. Because in the garden, nobody would ever think that it's weird that you have a very big bamboo group and a small stone garden. You would never think that the small stone garden is so small.
Or less important.
Or less important, because you actually judge by scale and not by size. The idea of a scale, that everything has its own scale, is much more interesting. What we try to do is to take this logic into the commissioning process and into the development of an exhibition architecture that would actually allow for large presentations and small ones, each to their scale. And that allows for a visitor to have an experience with a very diverse form of art making on different scales. The logic and the methodology of the garden became a key.
I love how healthy this biennial feels, considering the theme. Let's talk about the title for a minute.
Mm-hmm. When we thought about uncertainty and how uncertainty somehow is a guiding principle in the arts, but is so little talked about elsewhere, and when it's used in other fields of society, then it's always linked to notions of fear or notions of crisis. Whereas in arts, the idea of uncertainty and chance and improvisation are very, very present. They're rather a guiding principle.
Part of the creative process.
Exactly, part of the creating process through the eyes of the arts. One could imagine other ways to understand uncertainty as a guiding principle in other fields. If you think about uncertainty, you need to think very much about everything you took for granted, and maybe that it's not so easy to take it for granted any longer. And the forms of knowledge, or the knowledge ideas that have been dominating our understanding of the world and our role in it, maybe are also not so solid as we thought they were. To open up for an alternative idea of knowledge, or looking at other forms of knowledge that may be complementary to ours and not necessarily mean the opposite, to allow for contradictions, to allow for melting of different ideas, that's something that the artists do all the time. And appropriating ideas from or concepts from different cultural backgrounds or from different science forms, that is something exciting that we wanted to talk about and bring in.
Right, so it's, in a way it's a call to action, live uncertainty,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly. It
let's
works.
Just live it, let's do it, let's dive in. And
exactly.
It looks like all of these artists have.
Yes.
I love how they've taken your challenge and what they've done with it. The earthworks that are inside. You know, I love how you described this morning how the light and the life from outside, you're inviting them into the space. And some of the pieces that's very transparent, like Rachel Rose, with the light from outside interacting with the video upstairs. I thought that was gorgeous. And then Anawana Haloba also will have that interaction with the outdoors. Was that throughout your idea as you were seeking artists that were aware of what's outside?
There was a certain desire, let's say, from all of us curators to look at artists and practices that somehow at least are open to other forms of information and to the outside or to the other side or to this idea of an unknown dimension which could somehow feed into what we do. And I think then it became almost a kind of an uncertainty, then also became a methodology to work with a lot of artists who we commissioned to do something, who we invited to develop a project, and whose outcome is very much based on the discussions we had over the last 1.5 years, and who have responded in sometimes very direct and sometimes more distant, but in different ways, to this conversation and to a kind of changing reality also that we live.
And I think the reality that we live in, the world around in this country right now, I think you have an advantage being based here. You've invited artists to respond to political circumstances, and today a protest interrupting the press conference. I don't speak Portuguese. Tell me what was happening there.
The political instability over the last months have been kind of almost going in parallel to the development of our project. And I believe that, let's say, many of the themes that the Biennial wants to talk about or is talking about, be it the distribution of resources, be it other knowledge forms, being it allowing it for diversity or creating this plural space, the question of indigenous cultures, all of these aspects are very important in our curatorial project, let's say, from the very beginning. And they became more and more relevant. What is going on in Brazil at the moment is, of course, let's say it's a parliamentary political power dispute. But of course, there is another layer, much more violent behind that. All about these questions. It is probably about the resources, about the rights, about social equality, about privileges for some and not for others. What happened today was a protest or a manifestation by a group of artists rather spontaneously to organize themselves and use the platform of the press conference to express their standpoint. It's good that the Biennial can be this platform that allows for this form of manifestation and allows for a plural space where different opinions can exist, and it's fine.
I think so too, and I'm thinking about the fact that you're talking about privilege, and a lot of times people think of art as a privileged space, an art space as being a privileged space. But this biennial is free to the public, and it's very open to these political statements, as well as going out into the community, this biennial.
The biennial in São Paulo has a very specific characteristic, I would say, which is that it is probably one of the art events in the world that has the largest first audience with a first contact with art, which has to do with its location in a very popular park. There is a series of projects that are spontaneous. For example, the project of Ibirapuera, which will be activating several times throughout the exhibition period and different spots throughout the city. One performance for 4 days non-stop by Pope L, a performance by Dona Cucama, which has happened in 3 different locations, one in a cemetery close to Avenida Consolação, one in the Museu Afro-Brasil, and one in the pavilion building of the Biennial. There have been lots of collaborations with different groups, be it theater groups, be it musicians, be it people who work with embroidery, different artisans. These collaborations actually allow for a totally new network, of course, also for the Biennial. So this idea of a very huge outreach and a very huge first contact to art is something extremely inspiring, I think, for all of us and for all the artists to think what this role is of art within society.
I'm Kathy Bird. This conversation with Jochen Volz, curator of the 32nd São Paulo Biennial Art Exhibition, touches on global flashpoints that many of us take to heart. Our dialogue is emblematic of our shared sense of uncertainty as we face the precarious future of politics, human rights, culture, and the environment and communities around the world. In the dis-ease that threatens to distract us from our sense of purpose as cultural producers, I see a creative opportunity. Shall we embrace the philosophy proposed by this biennial? Shall we take a stand and live uncertainty? If you like what you're hearing, please send us a note at FreshArtINTL. To hear other episodes, visit our website or subscribe to Fresh Art International wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more conversations about creativity.